Hello, everyone. Thank you to the Harvard Asia Center for sponsoring this book talk. I'm grateful to Professor Lina and Yang Qu for the kind invitation and to Professor Halsey for responding to my book. Let's begin today by looking at the Malay archipelago. The Malay archipelago, oftentimes referred to as maritime Southeast Asia, consists of Muslim-majority Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei, Catholic Philippines, and Chinese Buddhist-majority Singapore. In earlier times, this region saw the rise and fall of several Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms, followed with the arrival of Islam in the Malay archipelago during the 13th century, leading to large-scale conversion of the population to Islam. By the 20th century, Islam is the religion of approximately 140 million people in Southeast Asia, concentrated in the Malay archipelago. Indonesia, in fact, has the world's largest Muslim population. Singapore, on the other hand, has stood out in the maritime world of Southeast Asia for its Chinese and Buddhist majority population. Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia during modern times has little or nothing to do with the early Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms of Sriwijaya and Majapahit. The majority of Buddhists in present-day Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore are ethnic Chinese who migrated to Southeast Asia or were born to their immigrant parents in the 19th and 20th centuries. Unknown to many, perhaps, a significant feature in the Chinese migration to maritime Southeast Asia was the dissemination and development of Buddhism in the diaspora. However, the term Southeast Asian Buddhism calls to mind Theravada Buddhism, the dominant religion in the mainland Southeast Asian states of Burma, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. While Vietnam is considered a part of mainland Southeast Asia, Vietnamese Buddhism, which mostly belongs to the Mahayana tradition, is often regarded as a part of East Asian Buddhism, which is based on the Chinese language canon and widely practiced in China, Japan, and Korea. In contrast, maritime Southeast Asia conjures the image of the Malay archipelago consisting of the Muslim-majority states of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei, as well as the predominantly Catholic Philippines. Singapore, on the other hand, is deemed as an anomaly because of the predominant Buddhist and Chinese population. Scholars of Southeast Asia tend to highlight the cultural and historical differences between mainland and maritime Southeast Asia by emphasizing the religious contrast between mainland Theravada Buddhism and maritime Islam and Catholicism to conceptualize the religious diversity of Southeast Asia as a region. In doing so, these studies fail to recognize the presence of Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia and its significance among Chinese communities in the predominantly Islamic and Catholic region. On the other hand, scholars of Buddhism have often limited the study of Southeast Asian Buddhism to the Theravada Buddhist majority on the mainland. For instance, Donna Scherer's seminal work, The Buddhist World of Southeast Asia, focuses only on Theravada Buddhism in Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia, while Anne Hansen's article on modern Buddhism in Southeast Asia recognizes the presence of a vibrant Chinese Buddhist minority in Malaysia only at the end of her essay. In other words, previous scholarship has considered the category Southeast Asian Buddhism to be almost synonymous with Theravada Buddhism. My book, Monks in Motion, Buddhism and Modernity Across the South China Sea, is a study of Buddhist migration in the 20th century. It also tells the connected history of Buddhist communities in China and maritime Southeast Asia. I have explored the intellectual and institutional history of Buddhism in China and in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore through the lives and careers of three prominent monks, Zuma, Yempei, and Ashin Jarakita. I demonstrate how their education, travels, monastic affiliations, and interactions with the post-colonial nation-state have contributed to the emergence of a field of belief and practice that I call South China Sea Buddhism. By South China Sea Buddhism, I refer to the forms of Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia which use Mandarin Chinese, Southern Chinese dialects, and Southeast Asian languages in their liturgy and scriptures that have emerged out of Buddhist connections across the South China Sea. In coining the term South China Sea Buddhism, I draw on Anne Blackburn's work on Indian Ocean Buddhism. In sketching out an intellectual case for Indian Ocean Buddhism, Blackburn emphasizes the connected history of Buddhist communities in South and Southeast Asia. I find the idea of Indian Ocean Buddhism, a term that Blackburn used to analyze Buddhist mobility and networks across regions, helpful to my discussion of my monastic migration and networks between China and Southeast Asia. Monks in Motion tells a history of monastic and institutional connectivity in the South China Sea during the 20th century, which arose due to Chinese migration and to larger forces of social political changes that took place in China and in Southeast Asia. My research into South China Sea Buddhism is propelled by three questions. How did Buddhist monks migrate from China to Southeast Asia? How did they participate in the trans-regional Buddhist networks across the South China Sea? What were the broader implications of these Buddhist connections? In addition to documenting Zuma, Yempei, and Ashin Jarakita's ideas, activities, and projects, my book has two aims. First, to present the connected history of Buddhist communities in China and Southeast Asia through synthesizing institutional and intellectual history, as well as local and global history. My focus is how migrant monks acted as agents of knowledge production in the process of selective reformation of Chinese Buddhism by reconfiguring Buddhist idea through negotiation. Second, to challenge conventional categories of Chinese Buddhism and Southeast Asian Buddhism by focusing on the lesser known, yet no less historically significant Chinese Buddhist communities in maritime Southeast Asia. I demonstrate that Chinese migration contributed to the spread of Buddhism and establishment of new Buddhist institutions in the diaspora. In my book, I follow Anne Hanson's definition of Buddhist modernism, who suggests in her study that modernist monks promoted ethical values that combine their understandings of what it meant to live in the modern world with interpretations of what it meant to be a good Buddhist. Similarly, I observe such characteristics of Buddhist modernism in the three case studies: the propagation of Buddhist doctrine, which the monks claim were relevant to the modern life and modern society, and reliance upon scriptural references and historical claims of orthodoxy to interpret what it meant to be a Buddhist citizen in the post-colonial nation-state. In his book, The Making of Buddhist Modernism, David McMahon argues that many key modernizers of Buddhism have been Asian reformers educated in both Buddhist and Western thought, and writes that some Buddhist reformers accepted Buddhist categories as modern discourse only to turn around to critique the weakness of modernism, resist Western colonialism, and to exert their own form of religious or national particularity. Monks in Motion builds on the works of Hansen and McMahon to show that Buddhist modernism in maritime Southeast Asia was both a modernist religious movement that sought to make classical Buddhist doctrine relevant to the issues of the time, as well as an exertion of religious and national particularity. By looking closely at the three monks and their networks, we see how each of them used Buddhist doctrines and historical memories to negotiate and justify the relevance of Buddhism in the context of nation building in post-colonial Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia. The remainder of my talk is divided into 4 parts. First, I will explore Chinese migration to maritime Southeast Asia between the 19th century and the first half of the 20th century, explaining how the overseas Chinese came to play a significant role in spreading Buddhism from China to the Malay archipelago. Second, I will examine the transnational career of Zuma, examining his activities and religious spaces in Malaysia during the second half of the 20th century. Next, I will focus on the case of Yempei, reviewing how Singapore's Buddhist history was intertwined with the larger history of migration and modernization of Chinese Buddhism. Finally, I will discuss Ashin Jarakita's attempt to make Buddhism less Chinese in order to safeguard the survival of Buddhism as a minority religion in Muslim-majority Indonesia. My book considers the 3 protagonists and their transregional networks within the historical context of Chinese migration to Southeast Asia, the Buddhist reform movement in Republican China, World War II, the emergence of Communist China in 1949, and decolonization and nation building in Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore during the second half of the 20th century. Chinese migration and the spread of Buddhism cannot be understood in isolation, and each monk is treated as a case study to show different aspects of Buddhism in different locations. While these 3 case studies demonstrate the multi-dimensional nature of South China Sea Buddhism, these differences are aspects of the same history of Chinese Buddhist migration and the same history of Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia. In order to understand the historical forces that contributed to the spread of Buddhism from China to the maritime Southeast Asian states of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, we must first examine the historical background to Chinese migration and the spread of Buddhism to maritime Southeast Asia between the 19th century and the 1940s to set the stage for the discussion of the 3 monks in this study. The Nanhai trade, as Wang Genwu writes, was the ancient maritime trade between China and Southeast Asia across the vast body of water that we now call the South China Sea. Fujian and Guangdong provinces, situated along the South China coast, were important ports for the South China Sea trade. These coastal provinces were also the epicenter of migration to Southeast Asia. Beginning in the 16th century, the attraction of commercial and trading opportunities motivated Europeans to establish colonies in Southeast Asia. This included the Portuguese, who established Portuguese Malacca, and collaborated with Chinese traders by engaging them as middlemen in the colonial trading port. Later, Dutch East Indian Company founded Batavia, which is present-day Jakarta, in 1619, enticing Chinese merchants who were working in the spice trade with China at the neighboring port kingdom of Banten to migrate over. The British East Indian Company, which colonized Penang and Singapore, later acquired Malacca in exchange for Bencoolen from the Dutch. Besides attracting long-established Chinese merchants from Malacca, the economic potential of Penang and Singapore attracted an increasing flow of Chinese migrants from Fujian and Guangdong provinces of South China. Large-scale Chinese migration began in the mid-19th century and lasted through the 1930s. The massive movement of Chinese population could be attributed to both the push factors within China and the pull factors in Southeast Asia. Qing China's defeat in the Opium War and the subsequent signing of unequal treaties has significant consequences on Chinese migration to Southeast Asia. In essence, colonialism in Southeast Asia, coupled with the Western opening of China, created the mechanisms for moving Chinese labor from China to Southeast Asia. Chinese migrants were active agents in spreading numerous deity cults into Southeast Asia. For many migrants, the long journey to foreign lands filled them with a deep sense of anxiety and uncertainty, prompting them to turn towards religious belief and practices which not only fulfill the spiritual needs of the migrants, but also significantly enhanced their confidence and gave them a sense of security in their new work and living environment in colonial Southeast Asia. The Empress of Heaven, Tianhou, also known as Maju, was probably the most popular goddess in the Chinese diaspora, given its popular regard as the protector of seafarers. At the same time, native place deities that were peculiar and significant to specific dialect groups also accompanied the Chinese migrants to Southeast Asia. The overseas Chinese communities worship these deities for a variety of reasons, including others like longevity, fertility, marriage, promotion, and protection. As revealed in a number of sources, overseas Chinese did not distinguish Buddhist deities from Chinese local gods, and they worshipped these sacred images by lighting candles and incense sticks. Many Chinese migrants venerated the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas along with Taoist deities and practiced the Confucian rites of ancestor worship. This form of pre-institutional Chinese Buddhism, which some scholars call unity of the three teachings of Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, was common among the overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia. Furthermore, Chinese merchants, not Buddhist monks, were responsible for running Buddhist temples in the host country prior to the last decade of the 19th century. The early Chinese migrants who resided and performed religious ceremonies in the temples were less educated and could barely understand the meaning and significance of the Buddhist scriptures in classical Chinese. The institutional form of Chinese Buddhism only arrived in maritime Southeast Asia during the last decade of the 19th century. By institutional Buddhism, I refer to Buddhism as an organized religion with its systems of teachings, rituals, clerics, and organizations. The arrival of educated Chinese monks in the Malay archipelago contributed to the institutionalization of Buddhism and the subsequent monastery building efforts among the overseas Chinese communities. Moreover, unlike their predecessors who were primarily ritual specialists, this new group of migrant monks who received their monastic training in China were concerned with the dissemination of Buddhist doctrines to the overseas Chinese. Between the second half of the 19th and the first half of the 20th centuries, social-political changes in China gave rise to a Buddhist modernist movement, which in turn contributed to the making of a vibrant South China Sea Buddhist networks. The emergence of a new cultural movement, which led to the May 4th movement in 1919 and continued into the 1920s, was a time when Chinese intellectuals attacked Confucian values, Chinese patriarchal traditions, and popular Chinese religious practices, while they promoted science, democracy, and the use of the vernacular language. During the 19th decade of the Republican era, the Kuomintang government, based on the ideas of secular nationalism and mobilizational politics, further launched an anti-superstitious campaign to regulate religious institutions and activities. Buddhist monastics and lay leaders perceived the proposed confiscation of properties during the late Qing period and the Republican government's religious policy as a threat to the survival of Buddhist institutions, prompting a Buddhist reformist movement to reform the religion. In a nutshell, the Buddhist modernist movement in China during the early half of the 20th century was characterized by reform of the leadership system in the Buddhist monasteries, founding of Buddhist research institutions, as well as lay and women's organizations, publishing of Buddhist periodicals, printing and distribution of free Dharma books, and opening of Buddhist libraries, setting up of Buddhist academies, and the promotion of Buddhist charitable activities. These Buddhist reformers participated in a kind of modernist projects as defined by Anne Hansen and David McMahon, making claims of the relevance of Buddhist doctrines to issues of the time and promoted Buddhism based on national particularities. Nanputuo Monastery, a well-known Buddhist monastery located in Xiamen, a major port city in Fujian province on China's southeastern coast, became a significant headquarters for these modernist monks in Southeast China. Many historians have noticed the strategic coastal location of Xiamen since the early modern period, which contributed to its importance both as a major port for maritime trade as well as an ancestral home or qiaoxiang for Chinese who migrated to various parts of Southeast Asia. Given the strategic location of the Nanputuo Monastery in the port city of Xiamen, it became a major base for the Buddhist modernist movement and monastic education in South China during the first half of the 20th century. Taixu was one of the most prominent figures among the Chinese Buddhist reformers during the Republican period. Born in 1890 in the Chongde County of Zhejiang Province, he became a novice in Jiangsu and received his higher ordination at the Tiantong Monastery in Ningbo. After the founding of the Republic, Taixu spearheaded the Buddhist revival movement and advocated for the need to reform the monastic system and promote education. He advocated human life Buddhism, or Renshen Foujiao, to revitalize Chinese Buddhism. His idea of human life Buddhism was aimed at changing the existing image and understanding of Buddhism as a religion for the dead to emphasize the practice of Buddhism for this worldly life, addressing the social and spiritual problem of the 20th century China. Under the embassy of Taixu, Nanputuo Monastery became a headquarters for the Buddhist modernist movement in South China, and it became a key nodal point in the networks connecting modernist monks and in South China and the overseas Chinese in Southeast Asia. The South China Sea Buddhist networks were crucial in the transregional circulations of people, ideas, and resources between China and Southeast Asia. The religious connections, on the one hand, facilitated the movement of Buddhists from China to Southeast Asia and fostered the dissemination of Buddhist modernist ideas to the overseas Chinese communities. On the other hand, these networks were used to transfer resources from Southeast Asia to fund religious activities in China. For instance, as the abbot of the Nanputuo Monastery, Taixu made 3 visits to Singapore in 1926, 1928, and 1940 to leverage on the South China Sea networks to seek donations from overseas Chinese to raise funds for his renovation plans for the Nanputuo Monastery, as well as to fund his education project at the Minnan Buddhist Institute. During his first visit in 1926, Taixu met with prominent Chinese businessmen and became friends with Dang Kaki and Ao Bun Ho. Taixu's friendship with these influential local Chinese leaders demonstrates the significance of transregional Chinese Buddhist networks, allowing him to seek financial support from wealthy business elites in the diaspora and opportunities to preach his ideas of human life Buddhism to them. The arrival of modernist Buddhist ideas further contributed to the institutionalization of Chinese Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia during the first half of the 20th century. Taixu had ambitious plans to spread his ideas of human life Buddhism beyond China and wanted to organize an ecumenical Buddhist movement to extend the reach of his modernist movement. The South China Sea Buddhist networks were crucial in supporting the missionary efforts of Taixu and his contemporaries in the propagation of their ideas to maritime Southeast Asia. In September 1926, Taixu came to Singapore and gave a series of talks at the Victoria Memorial Hall, which attracted a large crowd of overseas Chinese. As most of the Buddhist monasteries in Singapore during the early 20th century were disconnected from the laity, Taixu suggested that the establishment of a lay Buddhist association would be beneficial in propagating the Dharma to the overseas Chinese community. This proposal inspired Ning Dayun, a prominent Buddhist householder who founded the Chinese Buddhist Association with assistance from Zhuang Dao a year later in 1927. The Chinese Buddhist Association became an important institution for the promotion of Buddhist modernist movement in Singapore by providing education and welfare services for the overseas Chinese communities. By the turn of the 20th century, the development of institutional Buddhism in maritime Southeast Asia was linked to and enabled by broader events in China. Some of these modernist monks became abbots of the Nanputuo Monastery, making Xiamen an incubator of Buddhist modernism in Southeast Asia. Making Xiamen an incubator of Buddhist modernism in Southeast China. The South China Sea Buddhist networks, on the one hand, facilitated the missionary activities of modernist monks in maritime Southeast Asia, and on the other hand, helped channel the financial resources from the overseas Chinese to sponsor temple building projects and religious activities in South China. By the end of the 1940s, there was a larger presence of Buddhist organizations in maritime Southeast Asia. We will now look at the development of Buddhism in the regions and the ways in which Zuma, Yempei, and Ashin Jarakita promoted their respective forms of Buddhist modernism in the Chinese diaspora. Today, many Malaysian Buddhists consider Zuma to be the father of Malaysia's Chinese Buddhism. In 1913, Chen De'an, who would become Zuma, was born near the foot of Mount Meng-Tat in Lexing County of Zhejiang Province. He became a monk when he was 12 and later enrolled at the Minnan Buddhist Institute in Xiamen, where he became a student of Tai Chi. Following the Communist Party's victory and the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949, many Chinese monks feared communist hostility towards religion and hence decided to leave mainland China. Zuma first left for Macau, which was under Portuguese rule, to become the founding advisor of the Macau Buddhist Society. In 1954, he migrated to Penang and remained in Malaysia until his death in 2002. During his 5-decade religious career in Malaysia, he served as the advisor to the Portean School, founded and served as the inaugural president of the Malaysian Buddhist Association, established the Triple Wisdom Hall or Sanhui Jiangtang, and started the Malaysian Buddhist Institute. In 1998, Zuma became the first Buddhist monk in Malaysia to receive the title Datuk from the head of state of Penang for his contributions to Buddhism and education. Challenging previous studies on Chinese Buddhism in Malaysia, which have suggested a revivalism, and revitalization of the religion occurring in the post-colonial period, I argue that neither revivalism nor revitalization accurately describes Zuma's reforms in post-colonial Malaysia. This was because Buddhism did not experience a state of decline prior to his arrival to necessitate a revival or revitalization. On the contrary, what Zuma did was to displace the existing form of Buddhism in Malaysia with his interpretation of human life Buddhism or 人生佛教. By looking closely at Zuma's transnational life and career during the second half of the 20th century, we see that Chinese Buddhist migration expanded, corrected, and modified understanding of Chinese Buddhist modernism and significantly transformed the religious landscape in post-colonial Malaysia. Zuma redefined the basis of being Buddhist in Malaysia by drawing on Tai Chi's modernist idea of human life Buddhism. He encouraged intra-religious conversion by advocating a Malaysian Buddhist identity that emphasized this worldly practice of Buddhism, promoted a vision of Buddhist orthodoxy or 正信佛教, and established new Buddhist institutions for the promotion of religious education. By examining the Malaysian context with the idea of South China Sea Buddhism in mind, we are able to see the connected history of Buddhist communities in China and Southeast Asia. Chinese Buddhist migration has contributed to a redefinition of the concept of being Buddhist in Malaysia and created a Malaysian Buddhist identity based on the idea of human life Buddhism. When Zuma first migrated to Penang, the majority of Malaysian Chinese knew little about Buddhist doctrines and practiced a mix of Buddhist, Taoist, and Chinese popular religious practices. Furthermore, Buddhism was commonly associated with death and funeral rites. Zuma advocated for a national Buddhist identity based on the principle of human life Buddhism, stressing the need to incorporate Buddhism into one's life, practice Orthodox Buddhism, and take refuge in the Triple Gems. In other words, he wanted to invent a new definition of being Buddhist for the Malaysian Buddhist community. To promote Buddhist education, Zuma contributed to the expansion of Po Te School and established the Malaysian Buddhist Association, Triple Wisdom Hall, and Malaysian Buddhist Institute, which were crucial in disseminating doctrinal knowledge and facilitating intra-religious conversion among the Buddhist community in Malaysia. Next, we will look at Yempei. Singaporean Buddhists generally remember Yempei as a scholar, social worker, monk, responsible for bringing the ideas of humanistic Buddhism or 人间佛教 to Southeast Asia and promoting them in his lectures, writings, and social activism. Most of his writings were published in a 34-volume collection entitled Collected Works of Mindful Observation or 地观全集, and a 12-volume sequel entitled A Sequel to the Mindful Observation or 地观续集, making him the most prolific Chinese Buddhist writer of the period in Southeast Asia. Yempei was born in 1917 into a poor farming family in the Yangzhou city in Jiangsu province. In 1929, he was ordained as a monk. Yempei was very much a product of the Buddhist modernist movement in Republican China. Like many of his contemporaries, such as Zuma, Yempei received formal monastic training at Buddhist seminaries where he was influenced by Tai Chi's visions of human life Buddhism and Yin Sun's ideas of humanistic Buddhism or 人间佛教. Yempei's vision of Buddhist modernism, based on the visions of humanistic Buddhism, emphasized the active propagation of the Dharma, incorporation of religious practices into everyday life, and shifting the focus of afterlife salvation to this worthy social engagement. Following the Chinese Civil War, many prominent Buddhist monks fled from mainland China to Taiwan and Southeast Asia, which led to the spread of humanistic Buddhism. Following the communist victory and the establishment of the PRC in 1949, Yempei left China for Hong Kong and later settled in Taiwan with his teacher and friend Yin Sun. During Yempei's decade-long career in Taiwan between 1959 and 1964, he made 3 trips to Southeast Asia in 1958, 1961, and 1964, where he contributed to the conversations between Theravada and Mahayana Buddhist monastics and established connections with the Southeast Asian Buddhist community. Yempei initially wanted to migrate and spread Buddhism in Vietnam, but was unable to do so because of the Vietnam War. In 1964, he came to Singapore and spent the remaining 32 years of his life building a Buddhist community in post-colonial Singapore. His religious career in Singapore can be divided into 2 phases. The first, as the abbot of Ling Fong Prashna Auditorium from 1964 to 1979, and subsequently as a social activist and founding chairman of the Singapore Buddhist Welfare Services from 1980 to his death in 1996. During the first phase of his career, Yempei was concerned with the lack of Dharma activities in Singapore. He built a modern auditorium and pioneered activities such as weekly Dharma lectures, group practices, and Sunday school, which were uncommon among Buddhist organizations during that time. Yempei also relied on his networks to make his auditorium a nodal point in the global Buddhist networks, thus allowing him to invite monks from Asia, Australia, and even North America to visit and speak to his congregation. The publication and circulation of his collected works of mindful observation earned him a reputation as one of the preeminent scholar monks of Chinese Buddhism in the region. In the second phase of his religious career, Yempei became a social activist and founded the Singapore Buddhist Welfare Services. He was actively engaged with secular social issues that were of concern in Singapore society. Yempei's Buddhist Welfare Services played an important role in promoting elder care and filial piety, organ donation and kidney dialysis, and drug prevention and rehabilitation against the backdrop of a rapidly developing Singapore. Yempei preached Buddhist doctrine to not only justify the need for Singaporean Buddhists to be socially relevant and contribute to social welfare, but also went as far as to say that Buddhist teachings could be used as practical solutions to addressing national issues. The Singapore government awarded Yempei the Public Service Medal in 1986 and the Public Service Star in 1992 to recognize his contribution to social welfare and medical services. The form of Buddhist modernism that Yempei promoted in Singapore in response to a range of social imperatives and national concerns was essentially based on the idea of humanistic Buddhism that began in China during the Republican period, brought to Taiwan, and later transplanted to Singapore. As the Chinese migrant monk like Yempei traveled between Asian countries, creating networks and transmitting ideas of Buddhist modernism from one place to another, it was apparent that local politics, religion, and social issues were sources of concern and of opportunity. Now, let us turn our attention to Ashin Jarakita. Widely regarded as the first Indonesian-born Buddhist monk, Ashin Jarakita took it as his mission to propagate Buddhism in the archipelago nation. His Buddhayana movement, which combined the doctrines and practices of Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism, established an inclusive and non-sectarian Buddhist community. Ashin Jarakita crafted a vision of Indonesian Buddhism, or Agama Buddha Indonesia, as a diverse yet unified religion in line with the motto of unity in diversity of the modern Indonesian nation. Later, he introduced the concept of Tanghyang Apit Buddha to make Buddhism compatible with the first principle of Panchen Sila, the 5 philosophical pillars of Indonesia during the New Order period. The Buddhayana movement continues to attract a following of Indonesians in the 21st century. Ashin Jarakita was born in 1923 in Bogor, a city in West Java, at the time part of the Dutch colony of the East Indies. He was given the name Di Bon An or Dai Man An by his Chinese immigrant parents. These early exposure to Buddhism at Chinese temples or chanting was primarily through chanting and vegetarianism. Unlike Zuma and Yempei, who were born in China, Ashin Jarakita was a Peranakan Chinese born and raised in the Dutch East Indies. He was educated in the Dutch colonial education system and later studied chemistry in the Netherlands. In 1953, Di Bon An was ordained as a novice in Gonghoksi or Guanghuashi in Jakarta by Ben Qing when he was given the Dharma name Tizhen. After several months of monastic training, Tizhen decided to seek higher ordination to become a bhikkhu. The lack of the required numbers of monks for the transmission of precepts, however, made it impossible for him to become a fully ordained monk in Indonesia. Therefore, Tizhen planned to seek higher ordination in the Chinese Mahayana tradition in mainland China, but was unable to do so as religious activities were restricted under the communist PRC. Consequently, Tizhen was reordained and received his higher ordination in the Theravada tradition under Mahasi Sayadaw in Burma, who gave him the name Jarakita. Unlike his contemporaries in Malaysia and Singapore, who sought to spread ideas of Buddhist modernism among the Chinese community, Ashin Jarakita's vision of Buddhist modernism was to shatter the image of Buddhism as a religion and culture of the Chinese population in Indonesia. I argue that Ashin Jarakita's attempt to make Buddhism less Chinese was a calculated strategy to ensure the survival of Buddhism as a minority religion in the world's largest Muslim nation. He founded the Buddhayana movement that promoted non-sectarian doctrines and practices to be in line with the national discourse of unity in diversity. What emerged was a form of Indonesian Buddhism for the modern Indonesian state. The Buddhayana movement conceptualized Buddhism as a religion within three concentric circles. The innermost circle is the core teaching and liberating dimension of Buddhism. The next circle is the method, which is varied according to the personal capacity and karmic circumstances of the practitioner. Finally, the outermost circle is culture, which makes one form of Buddhism seemingly different from another. This, I would suggest, was a strategy of Ashin Jarakita to make Buddhism in harmony with the modern Indonesian nation by embedding the idea of reaching the core of the Buddhist teachings in the nationalist discourse of a unified multicultural Indonesia. In terms of practice, Ashin Jarakita encouraged a non-sectarian mixing of doctrines and liturgical practices. He preached that Buddhists should not become fixated on a single sectarian practice and should not consider another approach to be wrong and inferior. On a personal level, Ashin Jarakita kept the Theravada precepts of not handling money and not eating afternoon, and he maintained the Mahayana practice of vegetarianism. According to my interviewees, he did so to bridge the Vinaya practices of both traditions. Later in the 1980s, he grew a beard to look like a Mahayana elder monk, but continued to dress in Theravada robes. From his personal practice and his appearance, it was evident that Ashin Jarakita wanted to stress that he was neither a Theravada nor a Mahayana monk, but a combination of both. Following the 30th of September movement in 1965, Suharto became president and ushered in 31 years of authoritarian rule known as the New Order that lasted until his resignation in 1998. Suharto's government blamed Communist China for the 30th of September movement and for its influence over the Indonesian Communist Party and decided to cut diplomatic ties with the PRC in 1967. The government passed a series of laws and presidential orders to assimilation aimed at Chinese Indonesians and emphasized the Pancasila principle of belief in one Almighty God, using religion as a force to counter atheist communist influence. To make Buddhism compatible with the first principle of the Pancasila, Ashin Jarakita introduced the controversial concept of Sankhya Apit Buddha as a version of Buddhist Almighty God. He claimed that the concept of Sankhya Apit Buddha could be found in the Sankhya Kamahaya, a 10th century text produced during the reign of King Sindok from East Java. Following Ashin Jarakita's rediscovery of Sankhya Apit Buddha from ancient Javanese texts, he mobilized his disciples from various parts of Indonesia to spread these ideas. However, Sankhya Apit Buddha was a double-edged sword for Ashin Jarakita and his Buddhayana movement. On the one hand, the concept was accepted by Suharto's government, thus ensuring that Buddhism continued to be one of the recognized religions in Indonesia during the New Order period. On the other hand, some of Ashin Jarakita's followers became critical of his theistic explanation of Buddhism and broke away from the Buddhayana movement. In Ashin Jarakita's ideas of Indonesian Buddhism, we find a combination of doctrinal innovation and institutional building. His Buddhayana movement, which sought to create an indigenous Indonesian form of Buddhism for the modern Indonesian nation, safeguarded the survival of Buddhism based on a combination of Mahayana and Theravada Buddhist teachings, ancient Javanese texts, and visions of Indonesians' past. His ideas of Buddhist modernism were motivated less by scriptural concern than by Indonesian politics and the status of the ethnic Chinese in the country. In Monks and Motion, I have explored the histories of Chinese Buddhist migration, settlement, integration, and networks in the 20th century through two main themes. The first concerns the attempt to write a connected history of Buddhist communities in China and Southeast Asia. The other explores the role of Chinese diasporic monks in the making of Buddhist modernism in the maritime Southeast Asian states of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. I conclude here with some directions for future research in the hope that other more linguistically endowed scholars will pursue further studies on the connected history of Buddhist communities in China, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, and mainland and maritime Southeast Asia. In the first place, the evidence of Chinese Mahayana and Southeast Asian Theravada Buddhist connections discussed in this book reveals that Chinese and Chinese diasporic monks were interested in going to mainland Southeast Asia to exchange ideas and learn from their Pali Oriental colleagues during the 20th century. That is, the South China Sea Buddhist networks linking the Chinese monk to maritime Southeast Asia have also kept the Chinese Buddhists of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore in touch with Buddhist institutions and monastics in Burma, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. To what extent, if at all, did the presence of Chinese modernist monks in mainland Southeast Asia help to influence and inspire maritime Southeast Asia's Buddhist movements during the second half of the 20th century? What kind of missionary impulses and modernizing projects did these monks share? There remains much to learn about the patterns of Buddhist circulations in the South China Sea and the ways in which modernist Buddhist ideas overlap with and perhaps facilitated one another. Another area deserving further attention is the relationship between modernist Buddhists and pre-institutional Buddhist temples in maritime Southeast Asia. As we have learned from the case studies of three prominent South China Sea monks, modernist Buddhists sought to promote their vision of religious orthodoxy by setting themselves apart from pre-institutional Buddhist practices. However, there are indications that these leading monks were invited to speak and even receive financial support from members of popular Buddhist and Chinese temples. There were also Chinese Buddhists who participated and moved freely between modernist and pre-institutional Buddhist organizations without having to give up one over the other. Overlapping commercial, clan, and religious ties among Chinese diasporic communities in maritime Southeast Asia may have made it difficult, if not impossible, to have a clear-cut separation between modernist monk and pre-institutional Buddhist groups. Then, what were the dynamics between the pre-institutional Buddhist community and the modernist Buddhist monastic community? How did their collaboration or conflict impact the religious landscape in maritime Southeast Asia? Finally, for the time period considered in my book, Chinese Buddhist monks fled communist China and supported anti-communist initiatives in Taiwan and maritime Southeast Asia. Some recent and forthcoming works have revealed that Buddhists became embroiled in the Cold War politics of mainland Southeast Asia, yet little attention has been paid to the ways in which Chinese monks participated in counter-communist activities or to how they relied on South China Sea Buddhist networks to cultivate activist ties and collaborate with state actors and like-minded Buddhists during the Cold War. Examination of writings of Chinese monks in maritime Southeast Asia, along with Burmese, Khmer, Lao, Thai, and Vietnamese sources from the mainland, could help construct a more comprehensive picture of East and Southeast Asian Buddhism during the Cold War period. It is likely that a further unpacking of the connected history of Buddhist communities in the region will help us better understand the flow of people, ideas, and resources that shape South China Sea Buddhism. I will stop here. Thank you for listening to my talk, and I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you.